Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber who had a question, and I'll flip it in here, and he's wanting to know why he can only feel the deadlifts in his legs, not in his back. Obviously someone else asked there, and he's doing conventional, and he doesn't understand, because I've said the deadlift is a tremendous back builder. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on my crafting a little bit, and let's discuss this, because we can go a couple different directions with this. This can be useful for understanding several different big exercises. Now, the deadlift is not just a leg or a back exercise. The deadlift is a full body exercise. It works almost every muscle in your entire body enough to stimulate at least some muscle growth, other than maybe your triceps, pecs, and delts. That's about it. We've even seen data that noobs who deadlift even see their biceps grow. All right, even their biceps grow due to just the static contraction involved as a stabilizer in the deadlift. So when you think about all the muscles that actually move or contribute to the load, it's a tremendous number of muscles. So accordingly, the deadlift performed correctly is an amazing exercise for finding weak points in your body. What I mean is, because so many different muscles are involved, whatever muscles are struggling with their portion of the load are going to tend to be your limiting factors on the deadlift. And if something is your limiting factor on an exercise, it's obviously going to receive a little more growth stimulation than some others do. And that's why the deadlift is fantastic for bringing up lagging muscles. And a lot of people would say, okay, well, but that just means for the deadlift. It doesn't mean for overall whatever aesthetics. No, it doesn't necessarily mean for that, but it does mean for a functional movement, because the deadlift is a functional movement pattern. It carries over to so many different real-world endeavors that anytime you need to pick up a heavy weight off the ground for any reason, the deadlift will build all of the muscles involved with picking up a heavy weight off the ground. And any of the muscles that are weakest, it doesn't matter whether it's your spinal erectors or your traps or your hamstrings or your abdominals, whatever is the weakest link in there is going to get developed more. It will tend to find your weakest points and cause them to get stronger. Well, if muscles get stronger, they get bigger. So it is a full body exercise that is fantastic for finding your weakest points. Now, some people are under the impression that just because it can cause extra growth in the weakest links in it, that it somehow doesn't cause other things to grow, and that's not true either. It's impossible to do an exercise with progressive overload that works several different muscles and cause only one of them to grow. It doesn't work that way. It just will cause some to grow faster than others. And that is a fair statement with the deadlift, but they're not growing out of proportion for actual functional movements in that regard, though, because it's making them balance for that particular purpose. It doesn't mean you couldn't go back behind and cause additional growth in some of those muscles with other exercises. So we're not arguing that point. Now the thing is, this individual is feeling it in their legs and not in their back. There's a couple things going on here. That doesn't mean their back isn't growing. Okay, their back is probably growing if they're getting stronger on the deadlift. In fact, I will go so far as to say is that if they're getting stronger on their deadlift and progressing, it is impossible that their back isn't getting bigger. And by their back, I mean their entire back. Their lats, their traps, their spinal erectors, thoracic erectors, all of that are going to grow. However, they could be feeling it more in their legs because their legs are a weak link in the exercise. They could be feeling it because it's a weak link in the exercise. And you need to remember that just because you feel something in one muscle over another doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only thing getting growth stimulation. That's a weird bodybuilder idea that just doesn't apply in the real world. You don't necessarily have to feel something in a muscle for it to be growing. And what you need to remember, when you are working multiple muscles at the same time, you're probably not going to feel what you're doing in all the muscles involved. Because again, your body's only going to receive so much sensory overload. It doesn't want to notice or feel contractions in 6 different muscles at the same time. Your brain is registering them, but you're probably not consciously registering them. You're registering the ones that for whatever reason are getting some sort of maybe a stretch reflex, or getting some extra tension due to being a weak link, or because you just personally notice those muscles more as an individual for whatever reason. All right, it doesn't mean that your brain's not registering stuff in the other muscles. All right, just because you feel it doesn't always mean anything special. Now, another thing to factor in, it could be his technique. The deadlift is performed by a lot of people in a lot of different ways. There are different techniques involved even in a conventional. If he's feeling it more in his legs, It doesn't sound, he didn't say in his glutes, he didn't say in his hamstrings, he said his legs, which tells me maybe his quads. Now, if you're feeling the deadlift the most in your quads, if you're feeling a deadlift more than in your back, you are deadlifting incorrectly. You're probably squatting the weight up. You're probably dropping your hips so low that you're squatting the weight out of the hole. And you do see some people do that. I've seen people do that. Oh, what was his name? Someone showed me a clip of one of these other YouTubers, and I can't remember his name, like on Instagram or something, and I totally forgot it. I'll remember it later. He was basically squatting the deadlift up, and it looked absurd because it was so overpronounced. Brittany, what was the name of that guy?
I think it was Bradley Martin.
Bradley Martin. It was an absurd deadlift form. And yeah, he was squatting it up. Well, that's not the correct technique on a deadlift. And in fact, you're going to probably lift less weight if you're squatting it up like that. But because of that incorrect technique, it would put more load on the quads than you normally would on a deadlift. So you might be feeling it more. And if that's the case with someone's deadlift, they might want to step back, video it from the side or from even the front angle, and see if they're squatting the weight, like how much knee flexion is involved in the actual movement. And if it's excessive, then that's the problem. You need to not drop your hips quite so low. Because you want to drop your hips a little bit at the start of a deadlift, depending on the technique you're using. If you use a technique I do, but you don't want to drop them so low that you squat it up. You're dropping the hips low enough to get tension so that you use your glutes and your hamstrings to pop it out of the hole harder. All right, but you shouldn't be doing it so low that you're using your quads to squat it up out of the bottom, because you're just going to move less weight, and it's just biomechanically less than ideal. Unless your goal is to turn the deadlift into a complete quad exercise, meaning that you're doing it because you want bigger quads and you don't want to squat, you don't want to leg press. All right, that's fine, but just realize you are performing it in an inefficient manner if that's what you're doing. But yeah, the deadlift will grow your quads anyways, but that would make it a very quad dominant exercise at the expense of weight on the bar and therefore less back, less hamstring, everything else. So not really ideal. But, here's the thing at the end of the day. Any exercise like that is going to make everything grow. So think about it like this with your bench press also. You'll get guys who only feel a bench press at a certain point. And what you have to step back and ask, is it because that's just where they're feeling it, because that's where their brain's registering it, or are they performing the exercise incorrectly? Bench press is a perfect example of an exercise that is probably one of the best chest builders ever invented. And I know plenty of experts who agree. I mean, you see people who write stuff on this who do have actual advanced degrees in biomechanics who say the bench press is an amazing chest builder. Other guys say, well, I can't feel the bench press in my chest. And you watch them bench press, and they're not actually doing a bench press. They're doing some bastardized exercise they're calling a bench press. Example, an exercise to where the bar doesn't touch your chest is absolutely not a bench press. You can call it whatever you want, a partial press, or even floor press, I don't know. You can call it a jackass press, bucktard press, but it's not a bench press. The correct form on a bench press is for you to lower the bar down to your chest and touch it. If you don't touch your chest, it's not a bench press. And they might be using a wrong technique on top of that. A lot of guys don't pull their shoulder blades together on the bench press. Well, no wonder they're not feeling it as much in their chest, particularly if they're not touching their chest or if they're bouncing off their chest, because they're not getting the stretch at the bottom, the stretch reflex they could be getting in their chest by doing the exercise correctly. That means shoulder blades back, touching the chest, not bouncing off of it, not stopping short of it, and then they wonder why their chest doesn't grow. But if you perform the exercise correctly, your chest should grow amazingly well off the bench press, but so should your front delts and so should your triceps. So when you get the guys who say they only feel it in their shoulders or their triceps, maybe it's their technique, but it could just be that that's where they're feeling it at the moment as well. And the thing that you have to remember is, like I said earlier, just because you feel an exercise that works multiple muscles more in one area than another doesn't actually mean anything. Doesn't mean anything as far as what it's actually stimulating. That's just where you're registering where you feel it. And there can be a host of different reasons why that aren't even directly muscle fiber recruitment related. I mean, it can literally be something as you have a slight dehydration issue or a fluid balance issue in that muscle. And that will cause it to feel like it's cramping more, even though it might be doing less work than another muscle in the exercise. It could be, there's a whole host of different things going on. So don't assume that because you feel an exercise in one spot instead of another when you know that you're using the proper technique and you know that that exercise has been well documented to work all those muscles involved. Just because you don't feel it in one of them actually means fuck all regarding whether it's stimulating stuff or not. And that's important for people to remember. You can't forget that. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.